Here we are. You're very welcome to a new episode of Redefining CyberSecurity on ITSPmagazine. I am still Sean Martin, host of the show, and I still get to talk to all kinds of cool people about all kinds of cool things. You may have seen a ton of stuff coming out from Black Hat, and I'm always interested in the technical, research-driven stuff. And funny enough, a couple of the chats that popped up for me as interesting topics are related to measurement. And today, Allyn and I have been getting this on the calendar and putting together this chat on how do we measure, what are the metrics, should we care, what should we care about, and I'm thrilled to have Allyn on again. Allyn Stott, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun, and I'll just let everybody know again quickly what you're up to, what you can share about your role.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm Allyn Stott, and I've been doing information security things for about the last 15 years. And I started my journey into detection and response from the red team side. I spent the first 5 years of my career breaking things, causing trouble, making a lot of blue teams sad. And then at some point, you get a little frustrated and you're like, why are things not getting better? I'm here every year, but it's the same. So I made that jump over to blue team side of the house and kind of just been there ever since. Started just doing general operations and kind of a little bit of everything, and have gone from being just an engineer, a jack of all trades for InfoSec, and then have slowly narrowed my scope into detection and response. I've done both engineering and senior management roles, and I like to wander between the two. I'm currently in engineering role, and I have a really cool role right now because I'm on a team that we call the technology leadership team. And what's really neat is that I get to work across a lot of different teams and help influence the technical direction that we're going, so that we can not only detect and respond quickly, but then go over to the other teams and figure out, okay, how could we have prevented this? How can we make this better? And so I get to kind of float between all those different teams, and that's a lot of fun for me.
I love it. It sounds like fun. And as you were talking, I was thinking about when I was in quality assurance engineering, which included some security testing, AppSec stuff back in the day. Like you, I was like, I'm finding all these bugs. Can we not figure out how to find them faster, sooner, and do something better in dev? So I became a program manager. I'm like, well, if we just define the product better in the first place, then maybe we won't build bugs into the system. So I became a product manager. And then ultimately I got to work with a bunch of different teams to kind of like you, just kind of make things better all around.
Yeah.
So really, really cool. So all of that's fun and good. Organizations want to know that it's making a difference.
That's right.
Right? Are you introducing fewer bugs? Are you fixing them faster? Do you have less? I'm drawing a blank on the word now. Do you not reintroduce the same bug over and over and over again?
That's right.
So
the big answer of the big question of what would you say you do here?
exactly. What's your impact? So let's talk about that in the context of SecOps, right? So detection and response. I don't know how broad you go or how much you want to go in terms of the stuff, because I know this is part of a talk you've done, part of a bigger part of a new talk you've put together. Does it cover network, endpoints, cloud, apps, fraud, privacy? I don't know how big and wide you want to go, but I guess the big question to start is, what is measurement? What are metrics? And I think management cares, but why should we as practitioners care?
Yeah. It's funny when I think about metrics. I think about how I kind of landed in the position of needing to care about metrics, and it's not the best way, but it's probably the most honest way, and how a lot of us fall into it. I was in my first management position, and I was asked, "Hey, we need new board of director update for your detection response program. So let's get those by Monday." And you're like, "Okay, great. So what metrics have we used before?" And you take a look, and the team's like, "Well, so the last guy was putting these out. We don't really know where these numbers came. They're probably made up, but you're going to do a lot better, we bet." And
Only
yeah.
up from here. Only up from here.
Only up from here. That's right. And so you do what you typically do in these situations, and you Google it, and then you end up just copying metrics from either that, or from your last job. And so you end up in this kind of condition where you really don't care about the metrics. You're just trying to get something done. And I think this is especially true in like operational roles, where you really don't have time to do metrics. You're kind of just trying to get them done. You don't think about like why you should care. There's in thinking about metrics. I did a lot of research about like the state of metrics in general, like how metrics are business impacting. And I was reading this paper. I was actually laughing. The last time we talked, I talked about how my first reaction is to go to Google Scholar and look up stuff. But the same situation here. I'm looking up metrics in Google Scholar, and I found this really great paper out of MIT that's called Metrics, You Are What You Measure. And they talk about how the metrics that you choose, the ones that you kind of bring attention to, those help you make decisions and take action. And the metrics you choose will improve. And there's a double-edged sword there, where the ones that you choose could be really great. They might also not be the most important thing, or they might not be things you can control. And their entire argument is that you become what you measure. And so really metrics are the kind of beating drum of, this is what we're doing, this is what we're targeting to get better at. And that's all well and good, but you have a team of engineers that are going to look at that and go, "Okay, great. What can I do to make that better?" And whether that's nothing, maybe there's nothing you can do to make that metric better, or maybe it's something you could make better, but it's not going to actually make things better.
You remember that's coming through for me as well as I'm thinking about this, because there are figures that are, I'll say, tech driven, right?
Yes.
And they're performance related.
Yes.
So either some system or somebody sitting behind a system does it faster, or does it slightly better, whatever better means. And I feel that, because to your point, we're gonna make decisions, but some of those decisions may force the team to work later, or burn out, or leave something else behind that's really important. And there are connecting measures. So some measures we're not really calculating, like how do you measure burnout?
Right.
And then how do you measure the impact of a good result in one area that is having impact in another? So I don't know, your thoughts on some of that stuff. There's a lot in there. But
a really good example, the talk I'm giving at B-Sides Las Vegas is very like example, right? Like it's essentially a collection of all of my mistakes. Here's all the metrics I've used in the past. Here's why all of them are terrible. And I don't think I'm alone in a lot of these, because they mostly came from Google searches and previous jobs. But thinking about like even just some of the most obvious incident response metrics, like mean time to recover. A lot of these charts are very typical. You have, where your time is low, and then there's these spikes where, it took longer to recover. And so you look at those and the team's like, all right, great. Like, we want to bring down mean time to recover. And then we all look at each other and we're like, well, first of all, that's not just this team. The detection and response team don't have complete influence over mean time to recover. We could do everything perfectly, and mean time to recover may take a really long time, or it could be really short. It really depends. And that's the other piece of it, is that every incident we have is not the same type of incident. Incidents are so dramatically different, and yet we tend to visualize them as just single entities on a timeline. And so when you show a graph of mean time to recover, and it's the squigglies of up and down, what story does that tell? Well, it tells you that some incidents take longer than others. Okay, great. And does it tell you like where you can improve and where to get better? Probably not. The example I use is mean time to recover, where the time slowly goes up over the periods of November and December, which is something you see all the time. And it's like, okay, great. What happened here? Well, Thanksgiving and Christmas. That's what happened there. So, do you cancel those? Is that what the takeaway is there?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. No holidays for anybody, and
right.
No threat actors taking advantage of understanding that people are away during those times.
Yeah.
That's just changes.
In thinking about like those, especially like time metrics and like how, like, do we need to do something? I watched, before I gave this talk, I watched this really great talk by Eric Brandwein from AWS, and he talks about the tension between absolutes and ambiguity in security. And his argument about metrics is that when we look at a metric, it should immediately answer, what do you want from me? What do you want me to do? And a lot of the metrics that we use, especially the ones that are about time to, right? Like an incident response, we're almost obsessed with time metrics. It's all about mean time to analyze, mean time to triage, mean time to recover. And we graph all these and we see them, but they don't tell us what to do. Like, where am I supposed to go? And so in thinking about this and then thinking about incident response, one of the, I think, most powerful tools that I'm thinking about more and more incorporating and thinking about how to implement this is this concept of filtering out what you can't reduce right now. So if you have an incident and it's a ransomware incident, for example, and you're like, okay, great, I have this playbook for ransomware. I know this part of the playbook is going to take 2 hours. Well, sure, you can buy new capabilities, you can get tooling, but like right now, it's 2 hours. It's going to take 2 hours. Why include that time, right? Like, if you can't improve it, you've done everything to make that better, then filter that out. That way, when you hit the parts of your incident response that you didn't calculate for, or did actually take longer than you expected, and there's opportunities for improvement, those will spike on your metrics charts instead of, we know that takes that long. Great. Yeah, that incident will take that long. We can't do anything about it. That way, when you look at it, your metric immediately tells you, hey, by the way, you had an incident in December and remediation was the big spike in it. You had one incident where it was a ransomware incident, and it took 9 hours, and the playbooks, we estimate that it should only take like 4 hours. What happened there? Like, what is there room for improvement for that one? And that gives you like a specific incident type, specific playbook that you can actually go to, and an engineer's like, okay, cool. Like, I can go look at that problem. Like that I can answer to.
Let me ask you this, because what you described, entering the role, we need updated metrics. Let me see what we've done. previously in terms of reporting. Let's see what data we have in terms of what we're doing now. And that generates something. And morning, so I go back to my example of my change in roles where I said, well, maybe we define the product differently up front so that we know what we want, not just see what we get. Yes. So I'm wondering, have you uncovered anything where you can say, this is what we want to achieve? So maybe it's connected to business continuity or disaster recovery, or so in there is the definition of what we need. And within some boundaries of those requirements, we live, right? And if we pop out of that, then we're in trouble. Or maybe we want to shorten some of that stuff because we're entering a new market or we have a big competitor. I don't know. So your thoughts on kind of defining what you need and working toward that versus here's how we've always done it. How can we squeeze a minute or two off of something that may or may not matter?
Yeah. This is the first terrible mistake I've made when making metrics, which is really, it's losing sight of the goal, right? Like these is generally teams that are on call, they're operational, they spend their days triaging alerts and responding to fires. So it's really easy for us to lose sight of the goal. And so we end up describing frontline operational work with the metrics we've been given and passed on, and we don't take the time to think about, hey, what are we actually looking to measure? The example I have around like my first like big mistake here that I think is speaks to like the root and the start of my thought process around thinking about what are we actually trying to measure here? What are the things that we should be measuring? Is to start with, what is the thing that we're measuring today that makes no sense? And one of those today that I see like almost every program I've ever been a part of, we talk about the number of security alerts per month. And there's, it's this up and down, and there's questions of like, well, why is there more alerts this month than that month? And, you ask the real question, and the real answer is, oh, there's a lot of false positive from the IPS, so we just turn that rule off. But that's not a great answer to leadership, so you come up with this like great narrative. And so anytime you're thinking about, I need a narrative spin to a metric, like the data doesn't speak for itself, then you're running into problems. I'm heavily inspired from like especially from like a visual examples of metrics. Edward Tufte is, I've got a stack of his books in my library. And in both his book about envisioning information and the visual display of quantitative information, in both of those books, he talks about how like if you need a paragraph underneath your metric, you're already in trouble. Like the visual should speak for itself. And so I took a step back and I said, okay, what am I actually trying to say with this metric that has, the number of alerts? And then maybe I'm trying to make it better. Maybe I'm, visualizing it by true and false positive. Okay, great. Like, what am I actually saying here? Like, I have a lot of false positives. I think that's like the surprise. Like, that's the story, is like every team has too many false positives, and we're trying to tune it down. It's thinking about what are the different areas within detection and response that produce the value to the business. And last year I gave a talk about building detection and response programs. And I talk about the different areas that a modern detection and response program has, whether that's threat intelligence, it's threat hunting, it's your classic operational processes of triage, analysis, and respond. But all those things all have to flow back into the rest of the business. And maybe even more specifically, at least the InfoSec organization, because we have this unique position in detection and response that we're on the front line of things have gone bad, essentially. These are the things that are happening as a result of where we are today. Here's the things that detection and response maybe isn't the best strategy here. I also talk about within metrics that there's lots of times that we're so focused on reducing mean time to respond, mean time to contain, when the reality is that there's only so much we can do from a detection and response strategy. And a lot of times we need to flip it over to the preventative folks. And that's why I really love the position I'm in today, because I can look and see like, hey, what kind of incidents are we happening? What is causing the most problems? And how can other teams jump in here? Because they want to, they're just not always informed about those in a way that tells the story. We show these graphs of like all the alerts that are happening, and they look at it and go, okay, great. What action do you want me to take here? And so thinking about all those different areas, I came up with these five different areas within detection and response that I think tell the story and help inform the rest of the information security organization about how detection and response is doing. I'm terrible with making up cool acronyms. The one I have for this one is SAVER, SAVER, and those are streamlined, where we show how we're streamlining our operations through efficiencies, accuracy, and through automation. And a lot of this is focused on better tooling, better processes. It is really about how are we making it so that we're automating more things and spending more time doing manual tasks that we have to do manually, where you want somebody to look at it. And then the A is for awareness, where we want to share what we've learned about threat intel. There's been so many threat intel teams that I've had the privilege of working with, and I talk to them and I'm like, hey, like what's happening right now? Like if you were to tell me like 3 things that you're like, we should really be caring about this, what would those be? That in of itself should be on every like core program metric. Hey, we're doing all this threat intel. Here's 3 things that, the rest of the organization should be aware of, and maybe even associate the things that we could actually do today. And then the V being our vigilance, or how prepared are we for those top threats. I could go into like a very long rant about how MITRE ATT&CK has done a lot of really great things for us about like defining what the different types of things we care about are. But from like a metric standpoint, we've maybe taken it too far, where we try to measure across all of MITRE ATT&CK all in one day, trying to test every single technique, when maybe what we only need to do is focus on those things that come from our threat intel and say, hey, these are the most important things today, right now, from a threat intel perspective, that are either happening in incidents right now, or things that we know are very potentially going to happen. And part of this comes down to like, you only have so much time to do metrics. I only have so much time to do metrics. I don't want to try to measure across the entire MITRE ATT&CK framework by next week. That might be a little unrealistic, testing all of those techniques. But I could realistically say, hey, in the next month, we want to know how well would we do against these top attacks that we're seeing from incidents, from our threat intel, and tell the story of where are we in detecting those and responding to those.
Before you move on to E and R, let me ask you this, because it's been on my mind, and you touched on the threat intel piece, which, because I saw a post, I don't know, was it Chris Hoff that made the point of we see a lot of these presentations from the big tech companies, the Netflix and the AWS and the Googles and the Microsoft, of how cool their programs are. And that works for them. Maybe not even each other, but certainly not 95% of most organizations that don't have the money and the staffing and ability to kind of have a threat intel team and all these different organizations within the InfoSec program. So how does maturity change? Because one metric might work for a small team, but then as they mature, make no sense because they have better data and knowledge and a team and processes and stack to support getting different measurements. So I don't know. I'm sorry for inserting between the V and the E here, but how does that picture look from your perspective?
Yeah, it's something I get asked a lot, actually, from even the last talk, which is, because in my last talk, I talk about how important threat intel is to a detection and response program, right? Like it really should help us define what's the most important thing we should be working on. And the question that always comes to me is like, cool, we're like two people. So what do we do? Or maybe you're one person and that's like the entire IT, like maybe you're a small business and you have maybe, a quarter of a contractor that's your InfoSec team. I think that's the reality for a lot of businesses. And in those cases, it's almost more important that you have at least a general idea of what things you care about the most from a threat perspective. Because again, your threat intel is there to help raise awareness, but it's also there to set your scope. And so when you're looking at, what technology investments do I need to make? What things should I care about the most? That's where threat intel comes into play. And I always say, don't overthink it. You could do it in a day, especially with how much of this data is, I think, publicly available. I don't think you don't have to have, all of the threat intel subscriptions. Some of the best threat intel, even to this day, that I get is even just in Slack groups that I'm in, that people talk about, what things they're seeing and what's really been painful. So I think the approach that I often thought about is look at what external threat intel, and maybe that's as simple as like I'm in healthcare. What things are targeting healthcare right now? What's really painful? And then look at your best intel, which is your internal intel. It's what things are happening today. What type of security incidents have you had in the past? Is there trends to those? And then think about your organization's security risks. So this could be as simple as asking, what would be a really bad day for your company? What data, if exfiltrated, would make your chief privacy officer cry the most? I think that's like a really great metric. You can draw it with like the number of tears. Like this would be the most upsetting.
Measure the tears.
That's right. So yeah, using that to like help scope it to something that's much saner, and not trying to worry about all the things. It's very easy when you put on your InfoSec hat, even if you're only wearing it part-time, to be like, oh my goodness, there are so many things. And yes, there's so many things, but you're thinking about it from a risk, from a business perspective of, okay, I can't do all the things. What are the most likely things to happen? Let's just focus on those. And then at least there's a good story around like why you chose to focus given the limited constraints you have.
Nice one. All right, E&R.
All right. E and R kind of lead. E is exploration, and exploration's about raising up the things that you learn from your threat hunts. What did you learn about, as you learn about new threats, as you learn about your internal incident trends, how is that guiding your threat hunts? And I talk a lot about threat hunting in my last talk. I talk about threat hunting in my new talk. I been working on a maturity model for detection and response to help teams better measure their maturity. You know, we talk about like, how well are we doing? What are we prepared for? That's something I've been thinking a lot about. And I started with the threat hunting maturity model that I guess it came out 2015. David Bianco, also known as the person that built the pyramid of pain for detection and response. So those are always highlights and useful tools. But threat hunting is another one of those, like, we don't have time, we don't have people to do that, just like threat intel. And threat hunting could truly be as simple as walking over to your IT person and going, what's really broken around here? You know, that's that. If you want to know,
what executives yelling about what? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Which user would you say working here is probably the riskiest user? Those are just like really easy examples of what a very small team can do from a threat hunting exploration side of things, right? Like what things are we finding that we should know about, and actually including that as part of your program metrics of, hey, we're finding things. Maybe it's not, you know, some cool analysis technique that we came up with. Maybe it really is just walking over to your IT admin and being like, hey, so what's really bad here? And then the R is readiness. How quickly are we able to organize and respond to incidents? How complete are the playbooks that we have? And thinking about it not just from the perspective of time, but thinking about it from how much coverage do we have? How many things have we already thought about? From our awareness and from our exploration, how many of those things do we have playbooks for today? Maybe we're not mature enough to measure things down to how many minutes or how many seconds it'll take. Maybe we're more along the lines of, we have at least a playbook for these things. That's at least a good indication that we're somewhat ready to do this.
That's a good metric. Do we? How many playbooks do we have?
That's right. That's right. In thinking about like all of these like different you know areas that you could measure, the most important thing is that a lot of times, because we are just carrying along the metrics that we've already had, and we end up making a lot of metrics, actually. I don't think there's been anybody that's come to me and it's just like, we don't have enough metrics. I mean, a lot of times they say we don't have enough good metrics, but usually the conversation is, I get asked to make lots of metrics. My boss is asking for a metric for this. My boss is asking for a metric to that. And we really need to start pushing back on this need to understand things that maybe don't make the most sense. The idea here is that we are telling a story about like what things actually matter. And I think that by using a framework like this, that goal is to talk about what our objective as detection and response is, what value we provide. And so if we can't tie a metric back to one of these areas, then the real question is like, what question are we trying to answer with this metric, right? Like a lot of times the metrics we get asked to make, we don't ask like, what, like, well, what are you trying to figure out here? Because a lot of times if we had just asked, what are we trying to answer with this? You know, what question do you have that's not being answered today? Because I think that if we can be a lot smarter in the metrics that we build and choose, the lot fewer metrics we can have, so we can be a lot more targeted and focused on the metrics we create today.
I love it. I love it. Well, we're at pretty much 35 minutes here. I wanted to ask, because Marco's not here to say no more one more question from you, Sean. So you went through Savor, And is that the framework that you're working on, or is there something beyond that?
Yeah, that's the framework. That's a big part of it. There is more beyond it. With the talk that I'm giving, this is your starting place, but then it's like, okay, cool, but I actually have to build metrics now. And so I have more details around like, great, how do we build them? What questions do I need to ask? What components make up a good metric? And then I share the maturity model I've been working on, called the threat detection and response maturity model, and talk about how you can measure across 3 pillars: observability, proactive threat detection, and rapid response, to talk about not just like how your day-to-day performing from a metric perspective, but how your overall program is maturing or not maturing based on the projects and work and technologies you're choosing. So that's a big part of the talk I'll be giving at B-Sides Las Vegas.
Nice one. Well, I'll see if I can't push this up the production schedule so people hear it before B-Sides and all the fun times at Hacker Summer Camp. You'll be a Diana initiative as well, so people.
Yeah, if you miss me at B-Sides Las Vegas, I am speaking at Blue Team Con in Chicago the weekend of September 7th. So I'm excited. I haven't been to that one before, but it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun too.
Nice. The Windy City will blow some metrics around there. All right. Nice one. Well, Allyn, really cool stuff. Hopefully you'll join me again. I mean, any of those topics, maturity, the deeper dive in the framework, how to build a set of collection of metrics. I mean, we did a nice overview today, but if you want to come back and talk more about any of those other points, you're always very welcome, my friend.
Thanks. Sounds like fun. Metrics. Yes. Whoever said fun.
I know. Deeper dives in the metrics. Yeah, I have the fortune sometimes to teach security analytics class, which is all about taking data, turning it into stories, right?
That's right.
Primarily, we look at it from a driving business decisions perspective. These are all MBA students, but metrics should drive decisions as well, not just say how well you're doing or not. So, interesting intersection there. But anyway, Allyn, fantastic to see you again, my friend. Safe journey to Vegas. Good luck with the presentation, and hopefully you get to see a lot of friends and make some new ones there. And for everybody listening, thanks for listening and watching. And hopefully this sheds some light on maybe how you're creating or not creating or over creating and not measuring and not utilizing metrics properly, or at least appropriately for your organization. So feel free to contact me, contact Allyn, and hopefully we'll have more conversations on this topic. So stay tuned, subscribe, share with your friends and enemies, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks again, Allyn.
Thank you.